We can begin with the assumption that the best way to understand ourselves and others and relationships and problems is to recognize that there are three aspects of every human person, three roles that they play, three parts of their personality. Transactional analysts call this three ego states. And the purpose of this short lecture is to describe each of those in turn, what they look like, what they sound like, what they act like, what their motivations are, so that you can recognize them. So the first role is that of parent, spelled the way normal parents are, but we'll capitalize it so as to differentiate it from real moms and dads. Parents, however, behave the way we expect moms and dads to behave with their children. So parents tell their children what to do. They say things like, that's right, or that's wrong, or you ought to do this, or you ought not do that. They say things like always and never, should, shouldn't, ought, oughtn't, and so forth. They're always righteous, so they always say something with authority. Whether or not what they say is right, they always act as though it's right. It's very difficult to disagree with a parent. Parents can be critical, they can be hurtful and mean and judgmental. They can also be nurturing and recognize a need and then take it upon themselves to satisfy that need. So if somebody needs help, then they say, I'm the one to help you because I am a parent. I'm a nurturing parent. So there are two types of parent. Both of them are always right. They both say things like should and shouldn't, ought, oughtn't, always and never. One is a nurturing parent. The other is a prejudiced or critical parent. More on those later. The next role is the adult, and so we'll put the parent on top, the adult in the middle. The adult is neutral, is unbiased, is rational, logical, objective, we might say. They recognize that their perspective is their perspective, and when they make a decision, it's based on the evidence that they have considered, not what someone else has told them. The adult is meant to resemble a grown-up, but not to be confused with somebody who is 18 years or older, because plenty of people who satisfy the legal definition of adult do not behave themselves as adults in the transactional analytic sense of the term. And so the ego state of adult is an information evaluator, or makes judgments based on rules that make sense and that they're following for a particular reason because they work. The adult also gets things done and simply evaluates information. So that sounds pretty boring at first, but it will make more sense as we talk about specific problems that we face. The third is the child. The child is capitalized so as to differentiate it from real boys and girls. However, boys and girls often resemble or perform the role of child. We can realize that grown-ups often play the role of child as well. The child can be recognized by susceptibility to emotion. So in the midst of fear, anger, aggression, excitement, wonder, curiosity, spontaneity, not that all of those are emotions, but these are characteristics of the child. And so whenever there's an instance of being overwhelmed with emotion, that's something that's happening to a person, therefore that's a child kind of response. A child does what he or she wants or desires, or what they feel like everybody else wants them to do. And so again, just like the parent, there are two types of child. There is the natural or free child that does whatever they want and is guided by their desire, and the other child who's timid and shy and worried and nervous that they might do the wrong thing. So they're always looking over their shoulder to see if somebody might get them in trouble or judge them in a negative way. So we've got parent, adult, and child. The parent can be nurturing or prejudiced or critical, and the adult is just an adult because there's no good or bad way of evaluating information. You just evaluate it in as non-biased a way as possible. And then there's two types of child, the natural or free child that does whatever he or she wants, and then the adapted child that is constantly and nervously looking over their shoulder. So these are the three different roles that can be played at any given time by any person. Now in infancy, of course, an infant is limited to the role of child, natural child, because they haven't learned all the rules and what to avoid and what to worry about yet. So it's just the natural child. They're helpless. They are flooded with emotion, and so on. In time, the infant grows up, learns language, and is able to communicate and understand the social world a little bit more. And usually, between 18 months and 3 years of age, that's a lot of rules. Do this, don't do that, don't do that. And what they do is integrate a parent. And so now you have child and parent. And it isn't until maybe middle school that the walking child-parent combination develops an adult and can start looking at experimental evidence, for example, and making judgments for themselves. And this is the goal of a lot of the science laboratories in middle school. All right, so how can we do an example to demonstrate the differences of these three different roles in the personality? Well, I like the example of driving on the road. Let's say you're driving on the highway, and if you've ever driven on the highway, especially for a long trip, you realize that there's a politics of driving. There's like the right lane to be in and a right speed to go, and you have to respond to other people and be polite and responsive and so on, and aware, all of these things going on at the same time. Meanwhile, paying attention to your passengers and what their needs might be. So let's just say you're driving in the fast lane and you're going, let's say, 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, which I'm not recommending. I'm just using an example. And behind you, there's a car right up on your bumper. So there are three different ways we can respond to this, or well, really five, since there are five aspects here of the personality that I've just described. Let's start off with the adult, because that's the simplest. And so the adult would do what they understand works. Not what they ought to do, not what they should do, but what the situation calls for. So for example, if you're driving and there's someone on your bumper, you know from driver's education that the best thing to do if someone's in a hurry is to safely get over to the side of the road if there's one lane, but if there's two, when it's safe, change lanes so that they can pass you. There's no reason to take that personally or get upset about it. It's just what works. All right, so that's an adult response to the situation. Now, a critical parent response to the situation would be, "How dare you tailgate me? That's an unsafe way of driving. Where did you learn how to drive?" Right, so these are all criticisms that are directed at the person behind you. Maybe you even let them pass and then you try to cut them off or flip them the bird, but you do something to demonstrate that they're in the wrong and you are in the right. So maybe even you slow down to make them even more irritated. And so what you're doing is trying to demonstrate that you're right, they are wrong. So again, this is a very parent thing to do. A critical parent thing to do. A nurturing parent might say, uh-oh, something might be wrong. Let's see what I can do to help them. And then finally, the child, the adapted child, would think, oh, I'm a terrible driver. Everyone's upset by the way that I'm driving. I should let somebody else drive. Or I'm nervous. They're making me uncomfortable. All right, so this is a child response. Notice the adult would just say, okay, I don't like this, but let me get over when it's safe to do so. That's the best thing that I can do. I can control that at least. The child would say, oh, why are you riding on my butt so closely? I don't like that. The natural child might just say, well, I'm happy in this lane. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Or I hate you for wanting to pass me, right? So just expressing emotion and then kind of being over it. So those are three different personality states or ego states, different roles that we can play in a given context. But this happens all the time. In any conversation with a friend, with a family member, with a partner or spouse, we can play the role of child. Will you do something for me? Or I need help. To I recognize that you're in trouble and I'm here to help, nurturing parent. How are you doing? Can you let me know what's going on, adult to adult? We can respond to other people or interact with other people using these three different personality styles, roles, and structures.